today I'm going to focus on lifecycle assessment and lifecycle thinking and how you can use that to inform your strategies, your sustainability strategies. Just to kick off, I'm just wondering, is there anybody here from industry who's working on a sustainability team? No one? Nobody else? Okay. So my presentation is quite industry focused, and but it's particularly interesting, I suppose, for people who are getting involved in reporting, in product sustainability, and hoping to gain some value outside of the sustainability effort. So a little bit about myself. I'm an industrial designer by trade, but I specialise in product design, or in sustainable product design. I'm a lifecycle assessment practitioner, and I've led product sustainability projects with electronics companies most recently, and I've done projects in medical devices companies as well. So the what, why, and how. So first of all, what is lifecycle analysis, and how can it be used as a tool for developing your strategy? Traditionally, it's used as a little bit of an add-on. It's extensively used in academia, a little bit less so, but growing in industry. But it tends to be used more as a marketing tool as opposed to what it's got its full potential in. So why? It provides you with data, very rich data source, which can inform your strategy. With suppliers, I've found, in product design specifically, manufacturing, and throughout the value chain, and how it helps you to visualize, focus your strategy, synergize with the business objectives, crucially, and then prioritize your projects. So just first of all, on what kind of information it provides. So very simply, lifecycle assessment looks at the total life cycle of your product, from raw materials, extraction, manufacturing, supply chain, logistics, the use of the product, and the eventual disposal, how much of it can be recycled and go back into the raw material cycle, and how much is disposed of. It gives you, in its rawest form, it gives you a list of inputs of all the environmental impacts, or all the inputs from environment that are required: energy, water, oil, metal, etc. And it's quite a lengthy list, as well as all the outputs, emissions to air, water, soil, waste. And what you'll find is when you have your full inventory, you get a better idea of where the environmental impacts are occurring on your product. I take the example of a mobile phone, and nearly 50% is due to raw material extraction. This informs your design decisions, essentially. From a risk point of view, it helps you identify what your key resource intensities is. So this is an LCA that I did on a Bluetooth speaker. Just a small Bluetooth speaker. It takes about 14 tons of water to produce. There's no water in a Bluetooth speaker, obviously. That's all upstream in the supply chain. 7 kilos of oil wasted and used in the supply of metal, of plastics, and so on and so forth, and a significant amount of poisonous substances emitted to the environment as well. Essentially, it gives you this kind of quantitative data on your product. What else you can do? You can allocate, or you can flip your data to show you what components of your product is most contributing to your environmental impact. So here we have, I think it was a computer mouse, packaged, sold, used, and disposed of. And in the total, on the last column there, you have the full impact. So you can see the PCB is probably the greatest impact. Included in this is some accessories, some parts. What this does is it helps you have a conversation with your product development team. For example, can we lose some accessories? Can we reduce some parts? Use less screws? Use different types of designs to get the same product for our customers? So that's on product basis. But for a sustainability strategy, you need to be looking at your total product portfolio. So for example, one product, you see 82% raw materials, and these are all examples from products I've done in the past. I can't tell you too much detail about them. And then another product for the same company, a lot more impact for consumer use due to electricity use, and in transport, because it's quite a heavy product. It was being air shipped. So essentially, what I'm trying to get at here is that you can't compare two products to each other very easily. So in my opinion, the best way to compare products is through value creation. So The end goal being create as much value as you can for the customer, at least environmental impact. Value most commonly is measured through revenue, or what the customer is willing to pay for. In terms of lean, anything that doesn't create value is waste. And that is quite that synergizes with lifecycle assessment quite a bit. Anything that contributes to value, you've got performance of the product, customer needs, how you're addressing them, health and safety, and then on the bottom, anything contributing to environmental impact in a broad brush sense. You've got your materials, your waste, your total life cycle footprint, and the end of life. So once you do an assessment on several of your products, maybe it's your key flagship products, you should be able to map them on a matrix like this, what I call an eco-efficiency matrix. A lot of companies will have products, a portfolio that looks a little bit like this. Down in the bottom corner, you have low revenue, low impact products. In marketing terms, these are your bread and butter products. There's been a lot of cost reduction effort goes on, which is going to reduce the impact because it's not so flash, not so high gloss paint finishes and so on. And you're selling them at high volume for low revenue per unit. Up at the top scale, you have your flagship products, new products, maybe just recently launched, heavy packaging, being air shipped to get them to market as quickly as possible. I don't see many opportunities in those products because they've just launched, so there's not going to be any design changes anytime soon. So the big opportunities lie in the bottom quadrant: low revenue, high impact. These are old-fashioned products, probably using old technology, inefficient materials, unloved products in your portfolio, and they're probably about to jump into the top quadrant where they're going to be redesigned, relaunched, or maybe a replacement product. So this is where I would focus my efforts. In the sustainability team, what you want is to get all of those products as close as you can to the top left-hand corner, high revenue, low impact. Essentially, you're going to do that by engaging with your colleagues and encouraging them with data and with proven tactics to reduce environmental impact, but you need to do it in such a way that it also underpins their objectives. So why? An obvious one is to reduce cost, but I put in here total cost, and I'll explain why in a minute. To identify and quantify risk, especially in your upstream supply chain, but also downstream in customer use and disposal. To protect your brand, essentially, that's why a lot of companies get involved in sustainability. And also to go beyond the four walls of your organization, get out of energy efficiency and cost reduction projects, and engage with your supply chain, engage with your customers, and go beyond just simply reporting. So reduce costs is probably an obvious one. Any way that you can reduce materials, reduce energy use, reduce water consumption, it's going to have a direct or indirect effect on cost. However, it avoids the knock-on effects. What lifecycle analysis helps you to do, and specifically when you look at scenario analysis, is you can test design decisions in a modeling context, in a simulative environment. And you can make sure that decisions that you're making aren't going to negatively impact upstream or downstream in the supply chain. What I use is I compare that with a lifecycle cost assessment, where you can quantify using your bill of materials, for example, the cost of all the components, and say, well, if we remove 4 screws from the bottom of this product, it'll have a cost impact of such and such, or at the very least, know where your big cost drivers are and where you should focus your efforts. And essentially, it helps inform your design decisions. So before you go to your product development team, or before you go to your colleagues, you have a lot of data to back you up, and you have an understanding of where they're coming from, essentially. Identifying your risks. Lifecycle assessment is very good at giving you a broad stroke of where your big resources are happening, your big resource consumption is happening in your supply chain, which you can't possibly see, especially if you're quite far down, if you have 3-4 tiers of suppliers before you. It helps you to quantify your big issues so that you know where you should focus your efforts. And for example, if you're an organization that sends out questionnaires, and like we used to do in Logitech, to your suppliers to say, well, what are your environmental impacts? What are you doing about it? You may get back accurate and inaccurate data from several different suppliers. It's nice to know what your big issues are, to know where you need to drill down further. So for example, if water is a big issue, perhaps you should engage with several tiers of suppliers on water. and also to quantify your exposure to risk. So in areas where you have a water shortage, for example, if water is a big issue, you need to engage with suppliers specifically on that and know how big an impact a water shortage could have. Protecting your brand is an obvious one. Supply chain traceability is becoming more and more important, especially in the electronics industry, which is a complex supply chain. Knowing what goes into your product all the way up through the supply chain is obviously going to put you in a better position to protect against that. But also, I've seen a lot when companies engage in sustainability, they get a bit of traction, they get a bit excited, they start to make claims. If you start with lifecycle assessment, you can back up those claims. Lifecycle assessment is probably the most comprehensive study you can do on a product, but it's also the best respected. So when your marketing department begins to get engaged and start to want to make claims, at least you have that data ready to go. And it doesn't have to be, obviously if you make a specific claim, it has to be published. But lifecycle assessment is often used in-house without having to publish any data whatsoever. Obviously, it can be used to reduce product labeling and identify cost savings as well. And if sustainability if your brand is sensitive to sustainability, then you can use it also to differentiate your product against the competition. And I probably already explained how you can go beyond compliance, beyond the four walls of your organisations, and just plain old cost reduction projects. So I'll move on. So how? Visualizing your end goal, having an idea across your portfolio what your big issues are, and having targets and having data behind those targets helps you visualize what your end goal will be. Focus on what you can control and what is under your influence, and then synergize. And this is the key, I think, that LCA can bring to your sustainability strategy, is to synergize with your business objectives, and then also to prioritize your projects. So essentially, again, increase the value you create, reduce the impact you make. That is the end goal. And this is a kind of a generic slide, which is probably why it's not that interesting. Every company will have a different idea of what underpins their value creation, and lifecycle assessment will give you all the data you need to reduce the impact. What this graphic attempts to show you, at least, is for many organizations, what's under their direct control is the raw materials procurement, the manufacturing processes, and the logistics. Essentially, they can be under your direct control as long as you're engaging with your colleagues. However, under your influence is everything in the supply chain. All your design decisions will impact on the total value chain of your product. And all of those decisions, even though they may be indirect, have an impact on the cost of raw materials, because the more you can reduce consumption and the less waste you produce throughout the total value chain, the less it's going to cost as the future progresses. So synergize, and this is something I suppose I feel strongly about, because I've seen many sustainability projects go so far and go no further. On the left-hand side, we have the environmental impact. These will change from product to product, company to company. What I do is I translate those into cost, risk, and brand objectives. If you're hitting all three, then you're on a winner. If you're hitting at least one significantly, then it's worth bringing to your colleagues. But essentially, you need to be synergizing on a cost, risk, or a brand basis. I would emphasize that it should not all be about cost and risk, because there's a lot of people in the organization who know a lot about cost, more so than the sustainability team perhaps. But also, sustainability teams can bring an awful lot to the brand value of their company also. So I don't think you should ignore it. And then just to finish up, to prioritize your products, this is, I wouldn't read too closely, because this depends again on company to company. Essentially what I would have is a portfolio of projects, each addressing at least 3 areas in value creation, at least 3 areas in reducing the environmental impact. Obviously they're all going to reduce environmental impact, but they need to demonstrate how they support performance, customer needs, health and safety, cost, risk, and so on and so forth. Like in any continuous improvement project set, you're going to go for the quickest wins first. But just to reiterate that synergy with your colleagues' business objectives. So that's me. If anybody has any questions, I'll be around for the rest of the day. Thank you.